Hi, hello, it's Pearl Howie here in a creaky chair, talking to you on International Women's Day. I'm an international woman, and it's been my privilege in life to be an international woman and to travel around the world and to meet so many other international women. And although I'm kind of saying it in kind of a jokey way, this day has a lot of seriousness attached to it and a lot of issues attached to it. And as women, we have a lot of issues and issues around the world that change depending on where we are in the world. But I also want to share also the incredible joy I've had of being an international woman and traveling around the world, often solo, meeting women in cultures where they were not used to having women being independent. They were not used to seeing women traveling on their own, making their own decisions, not having a husband, or not having children even. And so that sparked off an awful lot of conversations around the world for me, particularly in places like Malaysia, where I was really surprised by a lot of the comments and the stories that people would share with me in what we would probably call quite well off and developed countries and developed areas. And we would usually think of Malaysia as being that because there's an awful lot of money in Malaysia. But sometimes that doesn't equate to everybody in the culture getting an equal share of that wealth, pretty much like everywhere, even in England. And it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed is in some ways just being me in those places has been a little bit of a light to people to say things can be different. And the same thing, I remember we were in Bhutan and a friend of mine, we were just sitting and a couple of girls came up to us. And, you know, in that kind of country, very often the people who see you and talk to you may never have met an English person before. And they asked us, they were quite young, and they said, you know, do you have a king? And at that time, of course, we had a queen. And it was really wonderful to be able to show a piece of paper, which was our money, which had a picture of the Queen on it. And they were quite overwhelmed by the idea that a woman could be the king and a woman could be the Queen. And it's one of those things I think about a lot today, because today is the first day that we haven't had Queen Elizabeth II as our Queen in England on International Women's Day. And it always really made me laugh, especially as I got older and was more aware of these things. Whenever the Queen would be meeting with people from around the world who in their own country were not standing up for women's rights, were actively against women's rights, or who were actively and openly misogynistic, America. And when the representatives, those dignitaries would come to England or the Queen would travel there, all of a sudden they were bowing to the Queen, they were bowing to a woman. They were desperate for her attention, desperate for her approval, desperate for her to be their friend. And sometimes she was, and sometimes she wasn't. I think she was always polite, always quite kind, but she was also noted to sort of say the small things that meant a lot, or to not give the honours to people who assumed that they would get them because they had been a dignitary. And that always kind of amused me when I would see people from various countries, you know, having to bow to the Queen or to treat her as an equal when they weren't treating the women in their own country as equals. So I think that's another thing that we've really lost this last year in England. We've lost our Queen, and we've lost that. I would say it was a wonderful joke, really, sometimes to see that happening, and to remember that this idea that people are better or worse than us is in our mind. because no one is better than us, no one is worse than us. That's what equality means. And unfortunately, in a lot of places around the world, that's not how things are perceived. A lot of places around the world, women are not seen as equal and are not given equal opportunities with things like education and all kinds of things, employment particularly. But my job here is not really to kind of talk about all of those issues as much as to kind of use and share my mantra that I use all the time when I'm out and about and I see somebody doing something and I'm so tempted to judge them. You know, and there are times I get caught up. There are times when I may even post things on social media where I get cross at other people. And I would say that particularly in the last couple of years, the last 3 years, if I saw somebody not wearing a mask or not following the COVID guidelines, and I would get all cross and I would think that I was superior, you know, because I was doing this. And we have these temptations like thinking that we're superior because we have more money, thinking that we're superior because we live in this place, or we have this job title, or we have a really fancy car, all of those things. And of course, on International Women's Day, we have to remember this idea, this silly concept of people being better and worse often comes out in gender issues, in the fact I'm female, you're male, you're female, whatever, you're non-binary. It doesn't matter. We're all human beings. And there is no one who is better or worse. So I share that mantra with you because I use it all the time. When I look at somebody and maybe they're smoking where they shouldn't be smoking, maybe they're using their phone, or maybe they've got their feet up on the seat on the train, that drives me nuts. But I have to remember they're no better, no worse. You know, we are all equal. And just getting over that is really a great healing for our own mind, you know, when we're getting all stressed out about things. And it's so important because around the world, people are being told that they're less than. In our country, people are being told that they're less than. And it's really, really important that we dig into the issues where things disproportionately affect people. And so they are sexist. They are perhaps misogynistic. And it's so important that we talk about that. That's what International Women's Day is also about. It's celebrating women around the world. It's saying, I am wonderful. I am wonderful and you are wonderful. It doesn't matter if we're male or female or whatever gender. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we respect and we honour each other. And also International Women's Day is a perfect day to dig into the issues that affect us. And we really need to also look at that in the context of the last 3 years, because we've seen that women are disproportionately affected by childcare needs. Women are disproportionately affected by being carers for their family and even their friends. And we could ask why that is, or we could try and make things fairer for all people who need childcare. We could try and make things fairer for all people who are carers, because then people aren't disproportionately affected. Unfortunately, we can't do the same thing with menopause, really, because it's always going to disproportionately affect women. And the problem that we have is, now this is something that probably hasn't really come out as much as we would like, in that COVID has had a huge effect on people who are going through the menopause at the moment for 2 reasons. And one is that COVID has disproportionately affected anybody with a health condition that's affected by menopause, like migraine. And it's also COVID and vaccinations have also affected women's menstrual cycles, our periods, which has then had a big knock-on effect on menopause. So we have got like a double whammy, and not maybe a triple whammy or a quadruple whammy if you add in childcare, if you add in being a carer, all of those things. So we're actually in a perfect time to sit here and also dig into some of these issues. And it's really important that we can do that. And it's really important that we can talk openly about things like periods and how awful they can be, and how vaccinations actually made periods a lot worse for people. We need to talk about that. We need to be open about that. We need to be open about the fact that sometimes periods can be so bad that they're life-threatening. And there are times when we need to know when to seek medical attention, when to call the doctor, maybe even to go to A&E from a bad period. And that's something we need to know. Perhaps we should add it to first aid training, because it's important. And just because it's something that is mainly women, I say is mainly women, mostly women who have periods, we shouldn't slide it to the side, you know? We shouldn't put it out there. But that's the way it's been. We've been embarrassed to talk about the things that affect women more. We've been embarrassed to talk about periods. You can hear it in my voice. I find this difficult to talk about because we've been trained to not talk about these things. We've been trained to not talk about menopause. And I'm so glad that I'm part of a generation that's really talking about these things, that's really getting it out there and asking for support. Because it's not right that a huge proportion of our workforce should be leaving the workforce in their 50s or 40s, maybe even their 60s, when really we're just getting started. We're just getting started and we've got so much to offer. And we need the support. We need the support to get through this actually quite brief time in our lives, so that we can go on and keep serving everybody. And it's so important. And probably this isn't my best talk because, as you can see, it's hard for me sometimes to talk about these things. We've been so taught not to use our voices and not to share all of these things. And it's important when we're talking about these things, we're not saying that we're better than anyone because we have periods. We're not saying we're more important than anyone because we're suffering from menopause. What we're saying, we're no better, we're no worse. If I have migraines, it doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else. But I need to talk about it. I need to talk to people who suffer from the same thing. And I need to understand. I need to understand my own conditions, my health conditions. And it was only when I went to a seminar in London that I discovered that COVID makes migraine worse and COVID vaccinations makes migraine worse and menopause makes migraine worse and COVID vaccinations make periods worse, which makes menopause worse, which makes migraines worse. And this can be the case for so many different health conditions. And if you are thinking about any of these things, I would just say the most important thing is to remember that you're no better, no worse. And it's so important that we can respect our differences, we can learn from each other, we can be the people who understand that we may not understand. And I was thinking about this recently, and it was the great film called Thelma and Louise. And it was one of these really great films that shone a light on the difficulties that women face in a lot of situations because of consent issues, because of violent issues, because of marital issues, because of all kinds of issues. And I remember so vividly the day that I saw this film for the first time. And I was at university, and I had gone out for the day to go and get something done. I think I had to go to the council offices to get something done. Back then when we had to go places because there was no internet. And my friend was actually my boyfriend's best friend's girlfriend, so that we would go out as a foursome sometimes. And we had gone out to get something done. And as we were walking along, some guys came past in a car and they just shouted at us, some sexist abuse. And we just got on with it. You know, we just went back and we went out to go and see this film. And we didn't tell our boyfriends because really it wasn't that unusual and it wasn't that shocking. I mean, it was shocking, you know, at the moment, but it was also like, yeah, it happens. And we sat down and we watched Selma and Louise, and we watched it all the way through. And I mean, I was just blown away. I thought, wow, this is the most amazing film. This is so incredible. And I remember I said to my boyfriend, I said, oh my gosh, wow, wasn't that great? Wasn't that an incredible film? Wasn't that brilliant? And he just looked at me and he said, yeah. I said, what do you mean? Yeah. And he said, but it wasn't very realistic. I said, what do you mean it wasn't realistic? He said, men just don't behave like that. And I mean, I laughed. I told him about what had happened earlier in the day. But it always stuck with me because he was such a good person. And he behaved in a really kind way and an equal way. You know, most of the time, it didn't make any difference if we were, you know, that I was a woman in their respect. I mean, I think like most people at that time, there was still some sort of like hangovers from the previous decades. But he would never have dreamed of behaving in the way that most of the men in Thelma and Louise behaved. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, that a lot of the time we don't honour the challenges that people face, whether they're women or young girls, because we can't imagine those situations. We can't imagine anybody behaving in that way. And sometimes that means we underestimate the challenges that other people face, because we can't put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who would do that kind of thing. And I think that's really important to remember. And other times, sometimes when we're behaving in a certain way, we don't realise how intimidating it can be. We think we're having a laugh, we think we're having a joke, we're just swearing and doing things like that. We don't realise that for somebody else that could be quite intimidating. And I'm not necessarily talking about being triggered or triggering. I'm just saying that if we are big or if we have a lot of power, we have to be careful how we use it. And that was also something that really hit home for me when I was traveling in Southeast Asia, that I had a lot of power in a lot of situations because I was the customer, because I was white, because I was English, because I had money. All of those reasons, all of those things sometimes meant that the person who I was dealing with was at a real disadvantage. And I had not realised that. And I often saw, like when I was there, I would see people in a resort or something, and the way they behaved on day one was a very entitled, overprivileged, let me complain about everything way. And then as time went on, suddenly the penny would drop and they would realise, and they would be ashamed of their behaviour, and they would apologise, and they would change. They would change the way they were because they realised it's very, very different when you are the customer in a resort in Malaysia or Sri Lanka or Thailand than when you're the customer in a resort in the US or in England. We have to be much, much more careful not to be a bully, not to bully people. And we have to be careful whether we're women, whether we're men, that we're not bullying other people with our actions or even our discussions. There's a time and a place for everything. But I wanted to share all of that with you and to really use my voice. If you're struggling with any of these things, if you're challenged by any of these things, you know, you can always message me, that's fine. But one of the things I would also recommend on International Women's Day, if you'd like to do something or be more involved, I would really recommend that you follow on social media, particularly on Instagram, the Kung Fu Nuns, because they are amazing examples of a group of people who are really working for international women. They are teaching women how to use Kung Fu, martial arts, for their personal safety. They are teaching people how to use bicycles in their region as more sustainable transport. And they also are working against human trafficking. They are often a refuge for people who either go into the nunnery and become practitioners to have a life that is not about being a wife to somebody or much worse, who could say. But they are a wonderful organisation, and I've been following them on Instagram for a very long time, all through the pandemic, and their work during the pandemic was something else. What they did in terms of providing food to people in the area, providing sanitary advice, and I'm a bit ashamed to admit, but when the pandemic started, I really thought, after years of going in and out of hospitals and dealing with somebody who's immune suppressed, more than one person who's immune suppressed, I thought, I don't need to be told or taught how to wash my hands. And then I saw a video by the Kung Fu nuns teaching people how to wash their hands at the beginning of the pandemic. And I realised I've been doing it wrong for all these years. So thank you to the Kung Fu nuns. They are an amazing group of women, and they're working in one of the areas of the world where women really have some of the poorest chances, in Nepal and in India. And they are really doing incredible work, and they're being honoured now, which I love. But it's really one of those things that as we reach out, it's so important to learn from other people and to be aware that we don't know it all and we may not understand it all. And as my grandmother said yesterday, all I know is that I know nothing. And the Kung Fu nuns know a lot, and their experience in that area of the world is huge. You know, we might think it's a small area of the world, but they have a huge experience and what they do. And I take my hat off to them all the time. And one thing I learned even this morning about them, funnily enough, I had a newsletter come through to me, and it was an article about the Kung Fu nuns. And a thing that I hadn't learned and didn't know was that one of the things that makes them so exceptional, apart from the fact they're nuns, apart from the fact that they learn, practice and teach martial arts, is that they have also been taught and continue to dance. And in that part of the world, the sacred dances that are part of the Buddhist community were reserved for men. And they have been taught by, I would say, one of the abbots, one of the great monks, the senior monks, how to perform these dances. And that is what they do. They continue to perform these dances. And for them, that is a great show of equality, to be allowed to perform, to learn and continue to perform and teach those specific dances that are part of a really rich Buddhist tradition. So I hope I explained that all to you very well. As you can say, these are things that are not easy for us to talk about. And I think it's important that we do. And one last thing is, when we are dealing with people and we might not understand, or we might take exception, and I found myself even this week, somebody said something about women, and I was I kind of took it the wrong way. And I don't think they particularly expressed it well. But as they kind of scrambled to clarify what they were saying and this kind of thing, and as we sat there afterwards, I thought they have the best intentions. They do have the best intentions. I may not agree with exactly what they said, but I also can choose not to take it personally. I can choose not to, I know that they didn't mean it in a sexist way. and I understand what they were trying to say. And so I'm going to give them a bit of grace and a little bit of forgiveness and just a little bit of space to make mistakes and to get it wrong and to say the wrong thing or to say the right thing badly. And I think we all need to give ourselves that right now, because we're going through a period of recovery and a great learning curve, that we're on at the moment. We're learning, doctors and nurses and other medical professionals, and we who are suffering from menopause or really painful periods, and we're learning because this has all happened so quickly. So those of us who had the vaccinations and then suffered from them, we're learning, and we're having different vaccinations, and we're learning how we can kind of mitigate the symptoms, mitigate the pain and discomfort and the other challenges that we have with COVID and what it's done to all of us. We're in a recovery stage. We are not over it yet, and we still have to heal, and we have to recover, and it doesn't happen overnight. Some of us, it can take a few years, and we also need to then recover from, for example, not have being able to work, or, as we all know, the gender pay gap. So one of the things I always think about when it comes to talking about women's issues and things is I look back at my life, and I'm very aware that if I add up, all the times when I was being paid less, or doing somebody else's jobs, or three guys' jobs and correcting their work and all that, that had I been paid fully, I would be about £1 million better off right now. And that's quite a lot of money. But one of the things that I also look at is perhaps if I had been treated better in those jobs and I had been paid more money, I wouldn't have left. And I'm extremely glad that I have left. So it's not quite £1 million, but I'm very, very glad for the changes that I made because I wasn't being paid equally. And I'm not defending the pay gap. I think that we should all be being treated equally, being treated fairly. And sometimes we need to figure out what that means and what that looks like. And I wish for us all, as we go forward, more equality. But most importantly, the equality in our own mind. When we look at anybody out there and our ego is telling us they're better than us, they're worse than us, please, please remind your ego and just say, come on, ego, remember, I am no better and no worse than anybody else in the world. Doesn't matter who they are, what they've done, what they're doing. Even if they're a prime minister or an ex-prime minister or a president or an ex-president, I am no better and no worse than anyone else. Lots of love. See you soon. And I hope you're having a wonderful International Women's Day. And I hope very soon to be going and being international again myself and being an international woman of mystery. Bye-bye.